Hey, welcome to my channel. I haven't gotten a chance to do this in a while. Missing some of the F1 races and also discussing them a little bit. Uh, Unfortunately, in this case, I can't display a video of the race in my video because last time I did that, YouTube marked it off as copyrighted and they basically blocked it off or prevented it from being seen. So I can't show any videos, even highlighted videos and such. So let's put it this way. Let's just discuss Baku itself. Basically, I mean, it was interesting. It was not anything out of the ordinary per se. Like it was sort of a mundane aspect more than anything else. I mean, quite honestly, I think it was a case where if you saw the race, it was something to watch a little bit. There was some interest in that point, but the results were pretty much it. I mean, the fact that Sergio Perez won over Verstappen and Leclerc. I mean, Leclerc being was in pole position, losing out to Perez and Verstappen. Of course, honestly, I thought it was going to be Verstappen over Perez, but I think it came down to the Red Bull strategy for each of them basically. Leclerc, I don't think would have ever. The Ferrari car is not as superior as the Red Bull car, of course, and we saw that. The one thing that was a little surprising. I don't think it's a surprise now. I think it's more of you're seeing how brilliant of a driver Alonso is and how he can adapt to the cars if he has a decently good car. Because when he was with McLaren, the McLaren car just kept crapping out on him. Pardon the French. It just kept crapping out on him. So it was one of those things like he could never join that. He was like, I can't do this. Hence he left. Came back for Renault. Um, Now with Renault now being Alpine, it was decent enough that he was in the mid-level tier basically. It was like finishing, like at least above 10 at least, usually in most cases. But now with Aston Martin, I think it was Papa Stroll made the right choice in bringing on board once basically uh, Vettel decided to retire. Um, it shows that Vettel, even surrounded with a decent car, is not so great per se. I think he's not used to the hybrid aspect of things. If it was either fully electric or fully diesel, like like the version 12 cars, I think he would have done really well. And that's where we saw his brilliance in there. That's why when he went to Ferrari, you were seeing all these issues and such. And then when he went to Aston Martin, same thing as well too. So I'm not taking anything away from Sebastian Vettel as far as him being a great driver, but between him and Alonso pretty much coming in almost practically the same car. I mean, there's tweaks here and there, of course, but he's putting Aston Martin ahead of like Aston Martin, or he himself at least, is ahead of one of his biggest competitors, Lewis Hamilton. It makes you wonder, like, if Alonso was in the Mercedes car, a Merc car, with Lewis Hamilton, would Alonso still be number four or possibly number three for all we know? It's hard to determine that. Um, but this is showing, like, how brilliant of a driver Alonso is. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Lewis Hamilton, of course, the GOAT of all time for drivers at this point. Look for him to probably come back with a win here and there somewhere along the ways. But it's a little surprising that Mercedes hasn't corrected their issues. Um, to the point where, like, even Russell, he finished eighth. I mean, they're not doing that decent enough. To the point where, like, let's look at the Constructors' Cup for a second. I mean, like, the results of the Constructors' Cup right now. You see right now, like, Mercedes is about, like 11 points behind Aston Martin right now. And, like, there's no one that's coming close to Red Bull. They pretty much got the Constructors' Cup in the bag. It's pretty much in the bag. Similar to what Mercedes was um, 3 years ago. And for 3 years ago and such, from 2013 on to 2020. Um, it's just a matter of now fighting for second place. Can Mercedes come back and outplay Aston Martin and come back with the points and come back and regain number two? And then it might, honestly, it's between Ferrari and Aston Martin and Mercedes. In theory, Mercedes should be number two, should be able to get to number two, but you're seeing their decline to the point where, like, I don't think they knew how to adapt. And I think this is Toto's lack of innovation. Because I think Christian Horner even said it basically. Christian Horner called it basically. He even said it himself in Drive to Survive, the Netflix series, one of the seasons. Toto basically inherited that Mercedes team that was built up by the prior team principal, and there wasn't much needed to be done at that point. But once the rules started changing, they didn't adapt. Red Bull did adapt. So that's one thing about I think Christian Horner is like the brilliance of Christian Horner. Him and Red Bull know how to adapt to rule changes. Because once they went to the hybrid, Red Bull wasn't that great, but then they adapted, and then they started coming back up, and they were always number two at that point, and it was always competing with Ferrari, coming close to Mercedes, and they knew they had a really great driver in Max Verstappen. Daniel Ricciardo, I thought would have been great too if he'd stayed on board too. I think would have they'd be competing against each other for the World Cup, no, for the World Championship, for the past 3 years. I think if Daniel had not left Red Bull, but what the fact is like looking at the totals right now, driver standings. Verstappen is at like again 93 points. Perez is the only second person close to him, which is 87 points. Alonso is far down to the third, 60 points as well. Hamilton being 48 points. Look for Alonso and Hamilton to go back and forth between 3 and 4, but that's only if Hamilton can overtake Alonso here and there. And that's assuming the Mercedes car does really well. If Alonso keeps finishing 3 or 4 always, then he's definitely going to be ahead of Hamilton at that point. The question now comes down to is can Alonso be ahead of Perez or catch up to Perez? Because no one's catching Max. No one's catching Max except for maybe Perez. But Perez is not always going to win, and he's not always going to get number two. He's probably going to get the third. He's definitely going to get podium most of the times, but he's not going to overtake Verstappen, especially in Monaco. And Miami, look for Verstappen. I think Miami is going to be this coming Sunday. I think you're going to see Verstappen take pole and winning the race again at that point. Look for Perez probably to be either 2 or 4, not 3, 2 or 4. Look for the second number 2 spot, either going to Leclerc or Sainz. I think moreover Sainz than Leclerc. And then, of course, Fernando Alonso either taking number 3 or number 2 for that matter, too. Hamilton, unfortunately, I think he's not probably gonna finish no better than 4 because the Miami track, Mercedes has never done well on that track, even though it's only been 2 years. But they still didn't do that well last year either, so don't look for them to do this well this year as well, too. Russell might overtake Russell in this case, might finish out ahead of Hamilton in the Miami track. But let's just see what happens. It'll be interesting to see between now and Saturday where the qualifying position is, who's going to be in pole position at that point. And I said I think most likely it's going to be Verstappen. But I think we're going to see a third straight championship for Max this year. Honestly, because he's running away with it. It's similar to what Red Bull did with Vettel, unless there's more rule changes. I think Red Bull is going to run away with it. Of course, they got that superior car, superior engine so far. No one knows exactly what happened to McLaren. They just like dropped out of the blue. I mean, like they were doing really well, and then all of a sudden, Aston Martin overtook them, and Aston Martin's overtaking now. What's their names? Mercedes, as well as Ferrari, because you were always going to figure it was going to be Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari in the top 3 at least. But I don't think anyone foresaw Aston Martin being in the top 3 at this point as well too. And the way things are going right now, and if barring nothing happening to Alonso and like nothing happening to the car, and Stroll, if he can finish in the top 10, at least mostly up 8 to 6, if he can always finish between 8 and 6, And if Alonso always finishes 3 or 4, depending, look for Aston Martin basically to be the number 2 in the Constructors' Cup. Quite honestly, don't be surprised if Aston Martin gets the second place in the Constructors' Cup, and knowing full well it's a Mercedes engine at that point too. Williams, I think they've got a long way to go. AlphaTauri, they're pretty much going to be in the middle of the pack. A little surprised that Haas is number 7. Looks like they're competing with Alpine, which, sadly to say for Alpine, it's not working out really well for them compared to McLaren. But at least they are close to McLaren, so it's just really a race to number 5 basically. Look for it between McLaren, Alpine, and Haas. If Alfa Romeo and Bottas can keep it up, then yeah, you know what? For the number 5 spot, it's going to be McLaren, Alpine, Haas, and Alfa Romeo. Ferrari, no one's Ferrari. It's going to be between Mercedes and Ferrari for the number 3 and 4 spots. If again Alonso keeps finishing number 3 or number 4, and if Lance Stroll, can finish between 8 and 6. But with that, I'll leave it at that. Sorry, I'll leave it at that. Let me know your thoughts. Please leave a comment in the comment section. I do read my comments. I do respond to them when they warrant a response. And of course, if you are a new person, or if you've watched some of my videos and haven't subscribed, I ask please subscribe if you do enjoy some of my videos and some of my content. And also, if you like this video, you're welcome to like it. If you don't like this video, you're welcome to dislike it as well too. But again, I do welcome comments, and I do like to respond to them, and as basically interact with people in the comment section more than else. Everyone would think I'm an extrovert. In reality, I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert. But with that, I'll leave it at that. Again, let me know your thoughts, and please subscribe. Usually how I end out my videos is unfiltered, unedited, and unrehearsed. Until next time.